Hi, I'm Carmen,
And I'm Steven, and this is Vienna Past and Present.
where we walk through the gilded and sometimes not so gilded halls of Vienna's history.
So, Carmen, how was your week? Staying warm there in Vienna?
I mean, it has gotten quite cold in Vienna, but I wasn't in Vienna that much this past week. I kind of spent half the week in Prague for work.
Nice.
So, yeah, I haven't been to Prague in ages. Did I go there with you ever? I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think I was there with another one of our friends.
Yeah, I think we just did Český Krumlov.
Like, I probably would have seen you in that same trip or something.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. So we were almost there.
In a different Czech city, I guess, yeah. No, but yeah, so I was in Prague. Unfortunately, I didn't see very much because I was basically just working between office and hotel. But yeah, I mean, Prague is a cool city. I feel like, now that it's getting colder and darker, it's got those gothic vibes. So I think it's a
appropriate for today's episode.
Yes, I think it's
nice.
It's well suited to our episode today, so that's why I wanted to mention it.
Okay.
How was your week?
Oh gosh, opposite. So here I am babysitting a friend's tortoise, and it has been a learning experience. Like, there's a lot of cool parts. I'm shocked by how much salad she eats every day.
How much salad does she eat?
Way more than you would think. Okay, so I'm kind of making her like half a head of lettuce. Then I will be cutting up a pear, cutting up a pumpkin. He sent me this big bag of groceries to watch her for the week. So I was just like, okay, this is not what I expected. I didn't ever grow up with like tortoises or turtles or anything.
I mean, like, how rotund is this tortoise?
This is probably the size of like a dinner plate, but more of an oval, if that makes sense. So it's really like, this is not something tiny. Like,
okay, so she's got an appetite.
She has a big shell. Yeah. So it's been fun. But she gets picked up today. And
what else does one do with a tortoise besides feed her? Like, what does babysitting a tortoise entail?
Hang out with her. She gets baths. She loves a bath.
Okay.
You can, but yeah, it's like you watch her eat. You can feed her berries. She's really into those.
Okay.
Otherwise, I guess I don't really know. But I'm just a babysitter. So.
You just make sure she survives. I guess that is the main task of babysitting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, Halloween is right around the corner, so we thought we would get a little spooky for this episode.
Exactly. We're going back in time to around 1730, into the shadowy borderlands of the Habsburg Empire, to deal with some blood-sucking creatures of the undead. That's right, we're sinking our teeth, haha, I couldn't resist, into Habsburg vampire lore.
Vampires in the Habsburg Empire? Not the Vienna tourism campaign that I've seen lately. Okay.
Right? It's really fallen out of the tourism brochures.
Yeah.
But anyway, I actually learned about this. I had not heard about this before either, but I went to a lecture by Dr. Christian Reiter at the Josephinum here in Vienna.
Okay.
And he's a forensic expert here in Vienna who has researched a lot of historical medical mysteries, everything from Beethoven's death, and he has engaged in about 30 years of vampire investigations. And he gave a talk a few weeks ago that I went to, which is where I learned about this topic, and I thought, oh, this would be a good episode, and like a really interesting little section of Habsburg history. I do want to give a little shout out. He's a very interesting guy, Christian Reiter, and he also has a podcast that he does, which is called Klenk and Reiter, which I will link in the show notes. It's only in German, unfortunately, but anyway, for German speakers, if you're interested, I recommend checking him out. He's done a lot of interesting stuff.
Nice. Okay, so we have science, we have superstition. That's been a favorite topic of ours lately. We also have some mild blood and gore. So this is our first Halloween episode, I think, officially. Okay, so let's set the time and place and scene for this story today. It's around 1730. The Habsburg Empire is huge. It stretches all over Central and Eastern Europe. There's also a big chunk of the Balkans in there now. What's now Serbia today is basically the empire's southern border at this time. It's bumping right up against the Ottoman Empire. That was kind of their nemesis around this time in history. Across the border, the Ottoman Empire had reached its peak in Europe by this time. It had entered this period of consolidation, so not really so much more expansion in Europe anyway. And it was involved in a war with Persia at that time, so its attentions kind of turned away from Europe.
And so the Habsburg Empire was really the literal edge of Christian Europe, and really saw itself that way as well, the defender of Christian Europe. Vienna also, let's not forget, had already survived 2 Ottoman sieges. In 1529 and 1683, the Ottomans had made it all the way to Vienna before being pushed back. And so the memory of that threat was very real within the empire as a whole, as well as in Vienna. But the borderlands were very sparsely populated. They were obviously far. I mean, if you think about it, or if you look at a map, Serbia is really quite far from Austria and definitely far from Vienna. So there's huge distances here. And so those borderlands, what is now Serbia, up against the Ottoman Empire, were not very, heavily populated. They were sort of wild frontier lands, and they were defended by local militias, which were called haiduks, who were sort of these irregular fighters who were like half soldiers, half bandits, some kind of, sort of wild frontier protection militia.
Okay, so like Balkan Robin Hoods for hire-ish. I seem to remember reading that there was a period in the empire like this, maybe it was this time, where they would give people borderland to settle there, and as long as they agreed to be ready to fight an invasion at a moment's notice, so it was kind of like this, like lawless-ish, militia-ish place.
Yeah, I mean, they needed people at the border, right? And so the Ottomans thought that they were outlaws, whereas the Habsburgs thought that they were very useful, right? Because they did see themselves as defenders of the Christian faith, and so they were opposed to the Ottomans. And so that's why they also get a bit this Robin Hood characterization, because that's how the Habsburgs saw them. They would often loot. They would kind of cross the borders themselves and loot and rob rich Ottoman administrators and stuff like that, and then distribute the money, the Habsburg side of the border. And of course, the Ottomans thought that they were criminals because they were like robbing their people. So, 2 sides of the coin. So it was quite a tense, half military, superstitious area. So the border world really represented, in the Enlightenment era, it was still sort of at the periphery of any kind of Enlightenment. And it was in this kind of superstitious, half militarized, bandit, lawless division between East and West that reports of vampires suddenly began to spread. And people were dying mysteriously, and they were claiming that the dead were coming back to strangle them at night. Those were the first reports.
Okay, so we have long-running political tension, then we have some superstitions and conspiracies that pop up. Now, why does that sound familiar? Carmen, I'm sure, just start us off. I'm sure it'll come to me.
I'm sure it will. All right. So the first real documented vampire case in the Habsburg Empire comes from a Serbian peasant named Petar Blagojevic. He died in 1725 after a short and violent illness, and within 8 days, 9 other villagers died the same way. The symptoms that they reported included nighttime delusions, extreme thirst, convulsions, and red blotches on the skin, especially on and around the neck. And that was then followed by death within just a few days. So it was a very, severe illness where people died very quickly.
Okay, so honestly, I wouldn't think that this would even be that newsworthy in 1725, but maybe I'm not giving the Habsburgs enough credit. Do we have more details here, or what's the vampire part?
Right. So the other villagers claimed that Blagojevic, the first guy to die, appeared to them at night and tried to choke them. And so that was the other villagers who died, right? So he died first, then you have 9 other villagers who die. And on their deathbeds, they claim that Blagojevic was appearing to them in the night, during their illness, and that he was trying to choke them. His wife also claimed, she was not one of the sick ones, but his wife swore that he came back to the house, after he had died, to ask for his shoes, of all things, and that she was so freaked out that she moved out of the village, which, honestly, if my dead husband showed up asking for some footwear, I might get out of Dodge, too.
At least. Okay.
Or maybe just give him his shoes. I don't know, obviously.
Shoes are probably more valuable, but
business.
Yeah, consider it.
Yeah. So anyway, she moves out of town. She moves to the village next door. And now you have another 9 villagers who have died. And they are claiming sort of on their deathbeds and sort of in their feverish state that Blagojevich had come to like drink their blood.
Huh.
So yeah, things escalated when locals then also claimed that he had murdered his own son by biting him and drinking his blood. And at this point, the term vampire started getting thrown around.
Okay, and they had the word vampire already. Like, this wasn't totally new to this region, right?
No, it wasn't new. So vampire illness was already known in Balkan folklore. It was basically shorthand for a mysterious and deadly sickness. Locals believed the way to stop it was to dig up the dead, chop off their heads, drive a stake through their hearts, and burn the bodies, which might sound somewhat familiar from modern vampire stories.
Yeah, okay, some pieces are starting to come together, it sounds like. Okay, and people living on a bloody imperial border, like maybe corpses and grave desecration, like this was more normal. I don't know, I always try to make excuses for people like this. I've been thinking a lot about presentism lately. So yeah, maybe, hey, dig them up and, chop their heads out. Like, maybe this sounded less strange to them. I don't know. So what happened next?
I mean, look, they did have people dying of a very severe illness, and they're living in a very, uncertain place and time at a border.
Like, you don't have a lot of tools right now, right? So if you think the corpse and the head beheading, like maybe you would consider. Anyway, yeah.
All right, so how does the whole vampire fever spread? By the 1730s, reports of vampire endemics, which were like little localized outbreaks, were popping up along the Habsburg Ottoman border, and especially in this region. And so the army got involved because the region was under military administration.
Okay, so soldiers were called in to dig up vampires. I like this mix. It's kind of like crazy, but also honoring and believing these traumatized citizens. Okay, so they're sending the soldiers.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. And another little fact that I really like is that local villagers, one of the reasons that they also, called in the military was because local villagers didn't want to desecrate graves without permission. And so they then appealed to the military for help. And the soldiers, not wanting to seem indifferent, to some blood-sucking undead members of their society, complied.
Okay, what a bureaucracy, I guess? Like, dear Mr. Manager Commandant, like, may we please decapitate these corpses? Like, okay, it's a lawless area, but they really sound like they're willing to, like, file the paperwork, too.
Yes. It's also very Viennese, I have to say. It's like, okay, we want to deal with these vampires, but first and foremost, we got to get the paperwork right.
Actually, that has been a common thread in some of these stories, okay? At the last minute, there's a license that's revoked, and then it really, stops everything. Okay, not the first time.
No, you got to have your stamps and your licenses. Nothing happens without that. So, anyway, the so-called vampire sickness caused fevers, delirium, shortness of breath, and dark bruises around the neck, like I already mentioned, which did look like bites. And people reported dreaming that something heavy was sitting on their chest, suffocating them, which is a symptom we'd probably now associate either with high fever, that can happen when you're kind of in this high fever delirium, or sleep paralysis.
Okay. But the diagnosis in 1730 would be undead visitor still. Like, so I'm tempted to Google the history of sleep studies now. I will wait. So I assume doctors looked at this too then, or what?
Yes. So there were then doctors called in, but at the border region, it was really military doctors that were available there. And so they described the undead, the quote unquote undead, as looking suspiciously healthy. They were quite bloated. I mean, bloated doesn't sound very healthy, but people in that region were often very undernourished. So bloated in this sense meant that they were like well-fed. So these, vampire corpses, these military doctors claimed that they were unusually bloated, they were quite rosy, they were not decomposed, and sometimes they even claimed to hear lip smacking sounds from inside the coffin, or they also noticed that male corpses had visible, let's say, signs of vitality, if you will.
Whoa. Okay, this story really has it all.
Yeah,
okay?
They're frisky.
Some interesting philias, that we can find in here. Okay, I guess I don't blame them yet for the undead things. Maybe the doctors a little more so, but yeah, this feels like the first few chapters of a vampire book. Like, I don't read those too often, but I'm assuming. So then, okay, the news traveled up the chain. What happened next?
Right. So word of all of this eventually reached Vienna, which is the capital of the empire. And Empress Maria Theresia, the empress at the time, was devoutly Catholic, but she was also at the same time a child of the Enlightenment. And so she was skeptical of these reports, and she wanted to get to the bottom of it and understand what was really going on.
Okay, so she reads the report, Undead Boners.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure that's how it was phrased.
Yes. Yeah, but like people digging up corpses at the edge of the empire, like that would not be good PR for the defenders of Christian Europe, I would imagine. And yeah, Siege of Vienna wasn't too long ago at that point, so they'd still probably want other Christian nations with armies as friends, maybe. So yeah, you would have to deal with your vampire issue, probably.
Yeah, I guess so. Plus, on top of that, she had the problem that the local haiduks, the kind of militia at the border area, they were threatening to abandon their posts if the vampire threat was not dealt with, which then would have left the border undefended, and obviously that would be a problem. And so, in order to kind of clear this up and get to the bottom of what was happening, Maria Theresia sent her personal physician, a man called Gerard van Swieten, to investigate.
Okay, so Van Swieten, he was like an Enlightenment guy, which was kind of just getting going around this time. He was a Dutch physician, so that would have been an imperial citizen at this point too, I think. And he was a big believer in science over superstition. And he was the inspiration for the Van Helsing stories, right?
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a little more detail, but yes, he was the inspiration. That is him.
Ooh, all right.
And so when he got to the border, he found that the reports came mostly from lay people or from the military. And so these were people who had mostly only seen corpses on battlefields, which it turns out decompose very differently than buried ones.
Oh.
Buried bodies decompose much more slowly than those that are left out in the elements, that are left exposed to various maggots, birds, whatever. The decomposure rate is very, very different. And so buried bodies will look, quote unquote, healthy much longer than ones that are left out on a battlefield, for example.
Okay, so I'm seeing the rosy skin could just be fresh tissue under peeling layers. The lip smacking, that could be gases escaping. The other swelling, maybe more gases.
Which one do you mean?
Yeah, there's a couple choices there. Could be more gases. Could just be. I think there's something too about blood settling or something like that. Wasn't that like a? Anyway.
Yeah, there's. Yeah.
Medical issues or medical explainable phenomenon. Medically.
Yeah, mostly to do it with gases, I think, from what I understand, yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, essentially it was decomposition doing what decomposition does. And so Van Swieten quite quickly concluded that there was, in fact, a real illness killing people, but that it was, of course, not vampires. He determined that it was likely a zoonotic disease, so that's a disease that is passed from animals to humans, and that it affected the lungs and digestive tract.
Okay, he feels very modern. I feel like I've said that a couple times in this show, in our podcast too. Like, I like him so far. These people that, feel like you could talk to him today and he might get it. So
he sends his report back to Vienna, and he essentially calls the whole vampire panic a symptom of ignorance and backwardness at the frontier lands. And Maria Theresia reads this report, and she then, this takes quite a bit of time. So, this was mostly happening in the 1730s, but, there were then continuing reports of these kinds of activities. And so she ultimately responds with the Vampire Decree on March 1st in 1755.
Okay, and I'm excited to hear this imperial decree, which, how often has that sentence even been uttered? Okay, but I kind of am. The vampire one?
So, Maria Theresia did issue quite a few decrees on education and things like that, but issuing a vampire decree is pretty badass, I have to say. It's probably the coolest one. So, what did the decree say? Basically, it said, stop this nonsense. Grave desecration, corpse burning, and vampire executions were outlawed, and clergy in particular were warned not to encourage superstition. And it basically worked, because official reports of vampires and vampire activity declined after that.
Wow. That is badass, actually. So, also...
Yeah, she put her foot down.
Yeah. Also, there was an investigation. People listened to the experts. Imagine that. So, yeah, do we know what was actually killing the people now?
Yeah, so there has been modern research done to try to understand what this actually was. And modern research points to anthrax, which is a bacterial disease that can lie dormant in soil for decades. and hot, dry summers followed by wet autumns, which is exactly the conditions that existed in the 1730s in this region. They cause spores, so anthrax spores, to infect cattle and sheep, which then further infected people who ate the meat. So that is kind of what modern science think happened, that it was an outbreak of anthrax, effectively, that went from cattle and sheep then to humans.
Okay, so the first imperial vampire outbreak was actually a refrigeration issue. You know, like so many, maybe, so many ailments, you could just manage vampirism by changing your diet. Okay, I did not expect that twist, but you know, why am I surprised?
Yeah, pretty much. That's it. And the timing checks out. Human cases peaked in autumn and winter, right after the weaker animals who were not expected to survive the winter were slaughtered, which was a common thing, right? That any animals that people didn't think would survive the winter would get slaughtered. And then you would have these big feasts, like Thanksgiving type feasts at the end of fall, beginning of winter, where you would consume all of this meat or, you know, turn it into sausages or dry it or whatever to keep it for the winter, to kind of get you through the winter. And stronger animals that were deemed hardy enough to make it through the winter would then be kept alive to be then slaughtered in the spring. And so it was exactly in this period of time, you had these weaker animals who it turned out were actually also sick that were slaughtered. And then you start to have this human outbreak in the winter, basically, in the winter periods in the 1730s. However, anthrax was not discovered until the mid-1800s, and so, you know, they didn't have that explanation yet.
So, like, Van Swieten wouldn't really have, like, had that option even to, like, know it was that.
Right. So Van Swieten did determine that it was an illness, and he determined that it infected the lungs and the digestive tract, but this bacteria had not yet been discovered or studied, and so he couldn't actually say what it was. So he never had a real answer to it. So yeah, vampires was the best explanation they had at the time. I mean,
I feel like this is like a solid episode of like Habsburg Law and Order or something, right? Like you have a big mystery, and I feel like this has been closed up pretty neatly and satisfyingly. But, like, okay, how do we get from these, you know, couple amateur family vampires, then to Serbian anthrax, to the Count Dracula? Because I feel like that's what we teased, right?
Did we? I'm not sure. I mean, Dracula would be the thing that most people associate with vampires today.
Right.
And there is a connection. So after Maria Theresia's decree, like I said, vampire belief faded in the empire, but the idea, you know, the concept of it stuck around in folklore and then later in literature. And the most famous of those, of course, is Dracula, who I think everybody kind of knows. I mean, I think that's a real universally known character.
Yeah.
And the book Dracula was written in 1897 by the Irish author Bram Stoker, who, by the way, when I was researching this episode, I discovered his real name is Abraham Stoker, which makes so much more sense. Because I was always like, what the hell name is Bram?
That's random, but yes, that is one of the factoid highlights from this episode randomly. Okay. Okay, in Ireland, it is not near Serbia, for those who may not know. And Stoker was never anywhere near the Balkans. So, from what I can see, he was a writer for a newspaper in London, who then wrote fiction. I did like a little Googling to see, you know, what experience he might have, but...
So yeah, he never really traveled to the Habsburg Empire, but he was very inspired by the old Habsburg vampire stories. And as you already mentioned before, his character Van Helsing, who is the Dutch doctor who fights Dracula in the book, was directly based on Maria Theresia's physician, Van Swieten. And another little factoid, Stoker originally planned to set the story in Styria, which is a region in southern Austria, and that is my home region that I'm from.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, initially Dracula was supposed to be set there, which was most likely inspired from an earlier vampire novel called Carmilla from 1872, which was set in Styria.
Okay, and Carmilla is about a lesbian vampire? It sounds way ahead of its time. I wouldn't want to compete with that one either if I were him, so...
I mean, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot going on already.
A lot happening, yeah. The 1870s, I think it was a time to be alive.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, this book, Carmilla, was a huge hit. So it was very well known. And Styria, actually, for a while, was very associated with vampirism as a result of this book. Although there were never really that many... I mean, you know, these kind of weird reports existed around the empire, but the main core of it was in the Serbian region. And so, yeah, Stoker eventually shifted his setting to Transylvania, as we all famously now know. Apparently, because it sounded more mysterious, and partly because he borrowed the name Dracula from Vlad the Impaler, who was a real 15th century Wallachian ruler. So he was not from Transylvania. He lived in the 15th century, and the whole vampire outbreak was in the 18th century. So, we're kind of jumping around the Habsburg region in time and space.
Yeah, the creative liberty has started. Okay, by this point. Yeah, I've definitely heard of Vlad. Impaler is just one of those timeless suffixes, I think, so...
Right, so what we think of as vampire lore today is basically a big mashup of various things. On the one hand, it's a Habsburg medical mystery from Serbia, then you have a Dutch Enlightenment scientist, an Irish novelist, and an unrelated Romanian warlord with a cool name.
That is quite a mix. Okay, but also there are bats involved. I think we're near the end of this episode, but where did the bats come in? Is that answerable?
Yeah, very good question. So the bats, they came quite a bit later. European explorers in the Americas discovered bats that did in fact feed on blood. And so because of the existing lore that already existed around bite marks and blood sucking, they called these bats vampire bats. And that's where the association came from, and that ended up sticking.
Okay.
But the original illness, so the anthrax, or, what was most likely anthrax, illness originally came from sheep and cattle. So bats actually had nothing to do with it. It's just that there are bats that suck blood, and then that was the association.
My gosh, that's interesting. Okay. I just figured, the whole bat lore existed, and then, the bats were called that. Not that's how the bats joined, Dracula's, aesthetic. That's kind of interesting. Okay, just the whole lore progression is kind of cool when we lay it all out like this, I guess. Just patting ourselves on the back.
And the bats are flying in from the Americas, right? I mean, they're coming from a totally different region.
This is an international issue, okay? This is not just Serbian anymore, all right? The whole world has adopted this.
Yes, we're transatlantic now. No, I thought that was interesting too, because my initial assumption was that, obviously, I did think it was some kind of illness, but I thought it was caused by bats. And that was the association, that the bats bit you, and then you got some...
I didn't even consider that, but I'd be okay, yeah, reasonable, especially if I had, way less information, one of these centuries.
Yeah, it comes from rabies or something. But no, the bats are a totally separate development that just kind of then got combined with...
Bats got caught up in this, too.
Yeah. But they make for a better story than cattle and sheep, I gotta say. I mean, they're not very threatening.
And listen, I feel informed. I also feel spooked. I don't know. I feel like we've kind of accomplished our goals today.
Very good. Are we ready for Halloween then?
I mean, I haven't even thought of a costume, but yeah, that's pretty normal for me at this point. I got a week. Are you doing anything?
No, I don't have anything planned.
But will you last minute? Does that happen there?
It's become a much bigger thing in Austria or in Vienna than, it previously was. But I don't know. The last years, I've never really gone out for Halloween. Although I used to love Halloween. It was my favorite. But it's not such a big thing here.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't normally do anything. Do you?
I mean, I usually end up doing something last minute. I'll get 24 hours notice and I'm kind of oh, well, yeah, I should. And, some FOMO feelings. So I threaten to put the costume on our social media. Okay.
Well, you can go very niche and dress up as Peter Blagojevich, first vampire victim.
Wow. OG vampire?
Yes. Serbian peasant turned vampire victim.
That is not a bad idea, okay? Just I'm okay, period folk costume, something klutzy like that. Maybe, okay? It's easy makeup. It's just
yeah, with some bite marks on your neck.
Well, just bruises, right? And can I have shoes? Some kind of sign like that.
Yes, the shoes. That's a key.
We've accomplished a lot today, okay?
All right, so I think we're well prepared for Halloween then. All right, so that is the story of vampires in the Habsburg Empire. So we went from a Serbian peasant to Maria Theresia's vampire decree, and finally to some pop culture immortality.
And I quote, "It's kind of poetic. The Enlightenment killed the vampires, but literature brought them back from the dead." Thanks, ChatGPT. I agree.
Love it. All right, so that's it for our show. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, share it with your friends or leave us a 5-star review.
And if you didn't, then keep it buried like a proper 18th century vampire.
That's right. You can you can find us on social media at Vienna Past and Pres on Instagram, or send us your episode ideas at viennapastandpresent@gmail.com. Oh, you got the German one. Do you want to try the German outro?
Auf Wiedersehen, Pfiat Eich, Papa. How'd it go?
Okay, you do Auf Wiedersehen, and then I'll do the middle one, and you do Baba. Okay?
Auf Wiedersehen.
Viert euch.
Bye-bye. Oh, that wasn't close. And happy Halloween.
And happy Halloween.
Did we land at? We'll see.
Oh, it's good enough.
That was good.